Sounds good.
Welcome. Hi, it's Mark Littlewood again. Second time in the week, it's becoming a habit. So this is, I'm going to introduce you to Claire Louv, who gave a talk at Business Software US last year from a company called Know Your Company. So let's, before I do anything else, introduce Claire. Hi.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Mark. Really appreciate it. Yes.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Hang on, I just pressed the wrong button there. I didn't want to show me, I wanted to show you. It seems to be, the microphone's more sensitive at this end. Are you there?
Yes. Oh, can you hear me now? For some reason I got muted, but...
There we are, you're back. No, I think the microphone at this end is a bit more sensitive than the one at yours. So when you're talking, you're not always in screen. So we fixed that there.
All good, all good. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Mark. And yeah, really excited to be here. I loved speaking last fall. So yeah, really excited to be here.
Tell me about Know Your Company and a little bit about where it started and where you got the idea from.
Yeah, absolutely.
All relevant to today's.
Yes. So Know Your Company is a software tool, and we help CEOs get to know their employees better. We specifically work with companies with about 25 to 75 employees. And what we do, Mark, is, and as you know, is when a business owner is growing their company, the feeling that they get when they are just, it's just them and 5 other people in a room, versus once they start to hire and they hit 20, once they start to hire even more, they hit 25, 30, all of a sudden the insights that you have about your company in terms of knowing what people think about the vision, knowing what people think about benefits, knowing, okay, I don't even know people's last names because I'm not even the person doing hiring anymore. You just start to lose touch. And if you're a founder who cares about making sure that your team feels as though they can do their best work and perform well so that you can have a great product, run a great company, it's a essential thing to know your company if you plan on running your company well. So what we do is, as a software product, is we help the CEO ask really, really good questions in a very regular and really thoughtful and lightweight way so that they can get this information, so that they can know, oh wow, are my employees overwhelmed right now? Oh wow, do my employees feel like there's not enough communication between projects? Or, oh man, the move that we made into a new office, that was kind of a tough transition and we probably could have handled that better. All things that are going to help you run your business better. So that's what we do.
Fantastic. And you are doing that both as a service, but you also have some SaaS software that you use. How important is that to the business?
Absolutely. So it's a huge reason why I give the talks, which is I believe that this problem of not knowing your company, the best way to solve it is really to have a in-person conversation with someone, so that there's so much more around just using a piece of software in order to really get to know your company and to make sure that across different offices, different time zones, and between different teams, that they're knowing each other better. So I think a big differentiator with Know Your Company compared to other software products that people might want to compare us to, or kind of group us in, is just the fact that we provide a lot of resources for our CEOs. I personally work with CEOs, give them my phone number, they have my email address, they can contact me at any time to figure out exactly what are the best questions I can be asking, how can I help even my most introverted employee give me feedback. And one of the biggest questions I get, Mark, is like, Claire, I tell people I have an open door policy, right? Like, I tell people I have an open door policy. I actually have my door open, right? I have my door open. I don't even have a door, right? And they tell me, Claire, I have an open door policy. I beg people for feedback. I go around, I beg people for feedback, and guess what? I'm still the last to know things in my company. I'm still the last to know when someone leaves. I'm still the last to know that people didn't like the way we launched our last product. I'm still the last to know that people wish they, had something as simple as a new office chair. And the amazing thing is, And the great thing about the software is that what we've done is we've really bottled up some really simple techniques to be able to unlock that kind of information in a way where you yourself as a CEO don't have to go around and in person, talk to every single person all the time. It's, when you're 50 people and spread across, maybe 3 countries, that's where the software really comes into play. But yeah, we definitely really pride ourselves though in giving as much information and as many tips and best practices to our CEOs so that they can ask the best questions. So yeah, that's definitely what we do. I'll give you, a little bit of a background too on the company itself, because we're kind of a weird company. So we are a 2-person company. And, we work with a couple hundred companies all over the world in about 15 different countries. We're completely bootstrapped. And we've been profitable since day one. So pretty weird as a company. And then on top of that, we originally, I didn't build the software myself. So the software was originally built by Basecamp, or formerly 37 Signal. So, the makers of the project management software tool. And they built it about 2.5 years ago originally for themselves, because Jason Fried, their CEO, he similarly felt, wow, I'm hitting maybe, we're hitting 40 or so people. This is the biggest we've ever been. And I just feel like I'm losing touch. And what can we do? And they're spread out all over the world. So he and a small team, they built Know Your Company. They used it internally. And they're like, whoa, they had an aha moment. They're like, this works. I'm learning all sorts of stuff and making a bunch of changes, at Basecamp that I don't think I would have done without it. What if, we started to sell this product to other companies? So they started to do that. And Mark, it just took off. So they signed up almost 100 companies in less than 6 months. So just incredible traction out of the gate. And and it's really because the product, it works. And so once they realized that they had something really valuable on their hands, they decided, well, okay, we need to focus on Basecamp and our primary product, but what maybe we'll try is this crazy idea of spinning out the product into its own separate company.
Got you.
Can I just me to run it as the CEO?
Fantastic. I'll come back to that. Can I just ask you? I think there's a real crackling on your microphone or something when you move. So I don't know if it's.
Good to know. It might be, what's really funny? I've done podcasts before, and sometimes my hair hits the mic and it's the perfect length. So
perfect. There you go.
That might be the culprit. Okay.
Fantastic. So there were a couple of things you talked about in your talk. One was why people are afraid in that sort of open door policy to or world to actually share information. And I'd love you just to kind of touch on that. And then the other thing that you talked about was a series of things that people could do, habits that people could form that would improve things. So it'd be great just to understand the why in a nutshell, and then some of those other things, and we'll bring in some questions.
Yes, absolutely. So when you look at your company as a business owner, and I talk to dozens and dozens of business owners every single day, and I ask them, what's the number one problem that you're facing? And they say, my people. And not in terms of my people are a problem, but what they mean are, it's people problems. That's the biggest problem I have. It's not my competition. It's not my concerns about the market. It's my concern that I'm not going to be able either to, one, recruit the best people, and then most importantly, keep the best people once I have them. Because my team is everything, and that's how I'm going to actually build the best product and build the best company. So when it comes to retaining your team, when it comes to thinking about how do you prevent turnover, what that really comes down to is, as a CEO, knowing, first and foremost, knowing what your employees need and want so that they want to be a part of your company. So you understand what's the best environment that I can create from them. And so, so the biggest thing that we focus on is how do you help a CEO get that information and not be the last to know, and know those things sooner than later so they can prevent that employee turnover. And especially, when it's, I think there's a statistic that was done, or a study that was done in 2013 that 70% of employees right now in your company are considering another job. And and anecdotally, it's insane. Just the other day I had dinner with a group of friends, and, one of my friends, she's thinking about, leaving her job, and her boss has absolutely no idea. But I wonder if her boss, did know, what kind of conversation they could have, what things, he or she could say to prevent that, right? And so here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is, well, why does her boss not know that she's thinking about leaving? And why doesn't my friend go to her boss and tell her why she's unhappy at the company? If she has these opinions and thinks things could be better in the company, why does she just tell her boss? Come on, right? That just seems so straightforward. Then all these problems would be solved, right? Why doesn't that happen? Why is it that a CEO is constantly the last to know that an employee wants to leave, that they're unhappy in the company, that something should be different? Why does that always happen? And the thing that I discussed in my talk is, Mark, is that it really comes down to two things. The first is this feeling of fear. So for my friend, naturally, she's getting paid by her boss, right? So the fact that she's getting paid, the fact that, she's an employee, she's not an owner in the company, there's no real incentive to speak up. She's worried about, my boss, she's going to get really defensive, or my boss is going to, look at me differently, or maybe I'm not going to be up for promotion, right? All these things that are, really based around fear, because whether or not as a business owner you are doing this on purpose, there is a immediate power dynamic between you and an employee. It's just how it goes. You're paying someone to do a job. That's the truth of it. And so there's this power dynamic that exists. So that's the first obstacle to why, my friend isn't going to her boss and telling her, hey, I have all these, things that I'm unhappy with, right? And I'm thinking about quitting. So it's, fear. But the second reason, and this is the biggest one, and this is the real reason for why my friend isn't going to her boss, which is that she feels as though, even though if she were to go to her boss and say, hey, these are the things that I think could be better in the company, I really don't think we're moving in the right direction, I'm actually thinking about leaving. The reason she doesn't say that is because she feels like even if she were to, it would be futile. So it's this feeling of futility. Yeah, it's something.
But I shouldn't be laughing, should I?
Well, no, I think here's the thing. It is. I think the reason why people laugh is, and I think for some reason the presentation got switched. Just FYI, Mark.
It's all right. I was going to give you a break just in case.
Oh no, all good. I just wanted to make sure there was no technical glitch. I don't. Google Hangout is oddly complex. I'm not going to lie. Anyway,
it gets more complex every time we come back.
It's weird. Oh, Google. But no, you laugh, rightfully so, because I think we can all relate to that feeling. I think most of us have had a boss at some point, and most of us have felt that feeling of, okay, even if I say something, it doesn't matter. No one's going to do anything. Nothing's going to change. And so that feeling of futility, that's really the number one reason for why people don't speak up at work. And it's actually proven to be 1.8 times more powerful than fear as an obstacle to giving feedback. So that's a little bit about the why, behind, okay, why don't my employees come and just tell me what they think is wrong in the company? Like, I can handle it. I'm tough. Like, I can, right? Why don't they do that, right? So it's fear and futility, those two things. And then in terms of how you go about...
Just before we do the how, I'm going to pick on Mark Stevens here, who has come up with a very good question, actually, which is, just how do you know staff actually know, or do staff actually know what they really want? So do you want all this feedback as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, when you're quite busy anyway? I think some people don't share that feedback because they think they're too busy, but then what's the balance? How do you kind of work out the way to play that?
Absolutely. I think that's such an important question. Do I really want to know? And because, hey, my employees, they might not actually really know what they want, nor do they really maybe even know what's in their own best interest. Completely fair. So I think given that, the reason why it's still important to know what they think, even if they might not know what they want, or you might think, oh, those are actually some terrible ideas, right? Despite that, the reason why it's still important to know your company and know what your employees think is because they think that regardless. So the thing is that those feelings that they're having, those sentiments they're having, those thoughts they're having, those things already exist. So whether or not they're right, whether or not they're even valid, whether or not they're even truthful, it doesn't really matter. The fact is those things exist. And so the problem becomes that you don't even know about them, so you can't even address them. So for example, if you don't know that an employee has a misconception about the business, right? That an employee thinks that you're doing something purely for profit and, you're skimping on, the values of the company, stuff that, yeah, maybe the employee is most likely completely wrong, right? So let's say that employee's thinking that. If you don't even know that, though, you can't do anything about it. So you can't address that person. You can't stop that sentiment from spreading in your entire company. So that's why it's so important to know how people think, whether or not it's even true or whether or not it's even if it's something that they actually want. Just because when you know it, then you can actually act on it. And then you can decide and say to people, hey, that's, those are bad ideas and here's why. And, Mark, that idea or that sentiment that you have, it's untrue and here's why, right? But if you don't even know those things, then you can't do anything about it. So great question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Mark. See you in Dublin, I think. So what do we do?
Yes. What do you do? So I have 10 different points, 10 different action points for how you can do this. So you can definitely look them all up in the talk that I give, or the talk that I gave, and the notes that you pulled together, Mark. But for the sake of brevity, there are really two things to focus on as a business owner. Two buckets, really. The first is to ask great questions. So the only way that you can get answers is if you ask a question, right? And so in order to get great feedback, it all comes down to asking a great question. So one of the best ways to ask a good question is to do something that I like to call going first. So what I mean by that, and this is something, I gave a lot of examples in the talk that I gave in September, but going first, what that means is that because you know now that there's a power dynamic between a boss and employee, and because you know that people have this sense of fear around, by virtue of your position, what you have to do is show vulnerability and go first as a leader in how you ask your question. So for example, one way to do that is to ask for advice instead of to ask for feedback. So for example, if you're in a board meeting and you go, hey guys, what do you think, what do you think could have gone better at the last board meeting that I ran? Could you give me some feedback? Get crickets typically with that, right? People are like, oh yeah, I don't know, it went great. You did a good job. Okay, next point. However, what if instead you came into your board meeting and you said, all right, everyone, that last board meeting we had, I don't know, I just felt like it could have gone a lot better. I want to be really, self-critical. I would love some advice from each of you about what I could have done better to run that board meeting. All of a sudden, complete opposite. You have people coming to you with all sorts of different ideas and thoughts. I mean, who doesn't want to give advice, right? Everyone loves giving advice. So that's something that we always highly recommend is, in terms of thinking about going first, is to give advice or to ask for advice. The other way to ask a great question is to be specific. So pretty conventional knowledge, right? Oh, if you ask specific questions, you get specific answers. But it really makes a difference when it comes to asking for feedback, because most of the times, and I'm guilty of this too, when you sit down with an employee to have a one-on-one and ask for feedback, typically you'll, a lot of times you open it up with something like, hey, hey Mark, how's it going? How are things? How, what do you think about? Yeah, exactly. And you're like, they're good. They're great, right? Exactly. Like 9 times, it's fine, right? Okay, this is cool. Like, can we get out of this painful one-on-one conversation now, right? So that's how things go. If you ask how are things going, a general, broad question. But if you instead ask a specific question and you say, hey Mark, we had a really great quarter. What's one thing though in the past week that you've noticed that you think we could have done better? So all of a sudden, I constrained it to the time period, 1 week, and I asked for one thing, right? And so all of a sudden, as a person, it's just much easier to answer that question. You can get a lot more specific, and you're going to get a lot more specific feedback. So that's the second thing. So so just asking really great questions, that's the first part. So, asking for advice, going first, and being specific. And then the second part of how do you encourage your employees to speak up? especially, people who are introverted or people who you typically don't hear from. The second bucket of things that you can do is to act, and to act on the feedback in some way, or to act in a way to show that you are receptive to that feedback. And there are a couple ways to do this. So one of them is to listen without judgment. And this is really difficult. But one of the things that, a lot of, I think, business owners in particular, is when you hear feedback, to listen to it fully and without judgment. It's a really difficult thing to do, but it's so important, because if you react defensively to the feedback that you're getting, someone's going to be immediately turned off by that. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to say, "Oh, it's futile," right? They're going to retreat into that feeling of like, I knew Mark was going to get, I knew he was going to get defensive about it. But instead, if you listen without judgment, and the way to do this, there's one really great, trick to do this, which is when you are in a one-on-one situation, if you're not a notebook person, bring a notebook, bring a piece of pencil, or bring a pencil.
Yeah.
When someone gives you a piece of feedback, write it down. Write it down. And that simple act of showing someone that you're not immediately responding, you're thinking about it, you're writing it down, that in turn shows them, okay, they're actually taking this seriously. So listening without judgment is huge. Another way to act once you do get some sort of feedback is to explain to people why you are not doing something. And this is a huge thing that a lot of our customers with Know Your Company, they actually struggle with or forget about, once they do start getting a lot of this feedback. But one thing that employees oftentimes will feel is they will feel like it's futile to speak up at work because they didn't know that you even considered their idea, or they don't know why you're not doing something. They don't know why, this benefit isn't being offered. It's because, well, we actually increased, the benefits that we're offering, for maternity and paternity leave. And so, we don't have the spend to that knowledge is missing. So if you don't explain why something isn't happening, that's, it's a huge opportunity to show people that you're listening. So for example, something that one of our clients do, she's the CEO of about a 200-person software company here in Chicago. And something that she will do every single meeting is that she will take a piece of feedback that she's gotten from Know Your Company, and whether she agrees with it or whether she doesn't agree with it, she'll thank that person, and then she'll say, here's why we are doing it, here's why we're not doing it, right? She's going to explain the decision behind why, how they're going to act on that piece of feedback. So explaining why you're not doing something is huge. And then the last thing you can do, and again, probably the most powerful, is that if you do get a great piece of feedback from an employee, if you do, sit down with someone and they're like, yeah, I know this is going to sound really silly, but my office chair is just killing me. It's just killing me, and I'm sitting in it for 8 hours a day. Would it be cool if I could get a standing desk? Right? Great idea. Low cost investment relatively, right?
Less money on chairs.
Yeah, exactly. And, let's say someone gives you this really simple, piece of feedback, and you're like, oh, that's a good idea. We should do it. Act on it right away. So that's, another really key thing that you can do to encourage people to speak up is act on a piece of feedback right away. Get that momentum going, and you will be so shocked with how people respond to that. So for example, we have clients who will ask one of the Know Your Company questions, which is, do you need a new office chair? And one of the clients I was meeting with actually in Atlanta early this month, he told me, he's like, yeah, Claire, he's like, I thought it was kind of a dumb question. I don't know. I just who cares about office chairs? He's like, but I asked it. And he's like, I was floored. I was floored by the response. People were telling me that their backs hurt. People were telling me they were going to get massages and therapy, and that they, needed new office chairs. And and the CEO, he was just like, I was just like, yeah, let's get new office chairs. This is not a big deal. Let's get new. So we got new office chairs literally the next week. And he said it was one of the biggest culture building activities they did as a team. He said morale just went through the roof over office chairs. And, he's like, the amount of money I had to spend on that, practically nothing compared to what we spend on all sorts of other things for employee engagement. And so, just acting on that piece of feedback right away was huge.
Great question here from James. Hey, Claire, how do you convince people to prioritize culture and people's best interests, which don't always have an obvious ROI?
Great question.
Particularly when things are getting harder and there's more measurable immediate things going on?
Great question. It's hard. I think the pitfall that a lot of, especially CEOs in particular, fall into is the tension between long-term benefits and short-term benefits, right? So when you are focused on things like the production of, the product that whatever you're putting out there, when you're focused on, hiring someone new and then seeing, the number of billable hours that they have, so then you're making more money, right? That is a short-term return that you can immediately tangibly see, right? But here's the thing is, and I'm sure it was James who asked the question you were saying for James, I'm sure he's seen this firsthand, is that the long-term costs though of not paying attention to culture are people leaving, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing that I tell a lot of CEOs who will say, yeah, Claire, I have friends who are CEOs and and they don't really like to prioritize culture. The thing I say is ask them the last time someone in their company left and they didn't see it coming. Ask them about that time. Ask them how they felt. Ask them if they did an exit interview. Ask them if they ever found out why that person left. Because when you get someone starting to think about that, it's possibly one of the most painful things a company and a CEO can go through, is to lose a really key hire. When you start to think about why that event happens, the thing it always comes back to is culture. I didn't see a career path. I didn't have a mentor at the company. I didn't feel like we were connected. I felt like I was out of the loop on everything. I felt like communication with leadership was really limited. So just, my advice would be to ask whoever you're trying to convince to make culture a priority. Ask them about the last time that they lost someone in their company, and have them tell the story. And I guarantee you that they'll come to the realization that, okay, I guess they did leave because our culture wasn't strong enough.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So I suppose a follow on from that, this is Fiona McPhee. Do you think expectations of employers have changed and become more demanding in recent years? Is this reasonable? Where should the line be drawn? I suppose if you think it isn't reasonable. Well, have employee demands increased, or have employee demands increased in general? What's your sort of? Clearly this is it's different depending on your company and your sector.
I was just about to say, it's hard to say because everyone runs their company differently, obviously, and it's hard to say because people themselves, we're all so varied. So I struggle with making too much of a generalization or overarching statement about what I think about demands. I'll give you my gut sense though, which is I think the thing that both on the employee side and on the employer side that people are both guilty of is the lack of focus on just getting to know people as people when you do hire them. I think that we are living in such a technologically drilled in world of social media, of instant message, Slack, of everything can be done through typing in and pushing a bunch of buttons and never having to talk with someone and have a conversation, and not ever having to look someone in the eye, not ever having to read their tone of voice, not ever learning what their hobbies are. So the thing that I constantly see, especially with a lot of the clients that we work with, is a lot of the communication breakdowns, a lot of the turnover that happens in companies, a lot of the weakened, cultures that we see in companies. It happens because people have not taken the time, or they've grown too quickly, or they're missing some sort of system where they actually know people as people. They know what work environments they provide. They know that Sally prefers working in the morning versus the night. They know how people communicate. People don't know anymore in the workplace, people as people, and so it's much harder to get I think work done because you don't have those as strong personal relationships. So that's the observation that I've made, kind of on both sides. And I'm not sure if that answers the question entirely.
Excuse me. We might come back to that.
Yep.
So one other question here that I do think is relevant to this is around training versus personality, or sort of I guess how much of this stuff can be taught and how much of it comes naturally? I mean, is there a massive advantage for natural communicators, natural leaders?
That's a great question as well. I think people, it doesn't matter what it is, whether you are learning music or a language or are trying to be an artist. I think some people, sure, have natural propensities for picking something up. So of course, there are people who are naturally more communicative, people who are naturally more outgoing and open, people who are naturally, more receptive to feedback. Absolutely. However, I'm of a strong belief that you can become good at anything if you have the right practice, the right tools, and the right people to support you to do it. And I think the same thing comes of learning how to give and receive feedback. It's it's absolutely harder. If you feel like, I'm a total introvert, or, I had a really bad experience with a boss and it's kind of just left me scarred and not really wanting to open up about stuff, whatever it is, of course, there are obstacles, but I do believe, and this is why I do the talks. This is why, this is really the vision for Know Your Company, is that it is possible for any person, regardless of where you fall on that scale of introversion, regardless of where you fall in terms of personality, past work experiences, et cetera. It is possible to learn a few tactics to, make sure that you're able to ask for feedback in the right way, and act on that feedback and receive it well.
You say that, but you wouldn't have a job if that was true, would you? If you could
exactly.
everybody. So
that's kind of my hope, Mark. I want to put myself out of business.
Do something different.
Well, here's the thing: this is why I got into it, right? So, to share a bit of my personal story. So, about it'll be now 3.5, 4 years ago. Okay. Or I'll back up even further. So I went to college at Northwestern here outside of Chicago, started my first company. After that, took a little break, decided that I'd never worked for anyone and that it would be a good experience for me to go work for someone. So I went to go work at a small startup. And when I was there, I was part of this 6-person team. And I was there for a little over a year. It was there that I realized this problem of feedback. So I recognized how my CEO, for some reason, I didn't feel comfortable giving him feedback about what I thought could be better in the company. And it wasn't because he was, a bad leader or a bad person, but it was because I realized there was no resource, there was no place, there was no one, no organization that was giving information and could teach him about how to create an open and honest environment. That didn't exist. So once I realized that, that's when I set out on this path, and I ended up starting my own consulting firm. So I quit that job, started my own consulting firm. My first client was actually Basecamp. So they hired me to help them as a consultant with these issues. And then they asked me to run Know Your Company. So it's a really personal, topic for me, because I've felt the pain. Like, I know what it feels like to go to work every single day and to just feel so frustrated because you don't want to hate your job. Life is just a lot better when you don't hate your job. And so figuring out, how do I help people, not hate their jobs? How do I help people communicate with people who could actually shape the environment to be better?
Yeah.
That's definitely what we're about.
Do you want to, or have you thought about kind of growing the software piece of your business? There are quite a lot of kind of things that give you, I find them all incredibly annoying, but you download them and they give you instant zen if you look at them enough times a day or something. So you have to switch off all the notifications and stuff. There are things for mood and for emotional intelligence and all sorts of things. Is there something that, and I've seen a few things for employee spirit or engagement or whatever. Is that a kind of a market that you're looking at? Thinking about? What do you think about it?
Yeah. So the thing that I think about and I get really excited about is just being really focused on how do we help more CEOs get to know their company better? How do we help more CEOs just kick ass at their jobs? Because my belief is that if you do that, then, if if you have CEOs who are kicking ass at their jobs, that means they're building great companies, great places to work, and they can help people be happier and get great work done within those companies. So any ways to solve that problem, I'm actively thinking about. We think about it all the time. But it's interesting. I mean, we are a 2-person company. We are, completely bootstrapped. So when it comes to focus, one thing that I've had to find the discipline for is making sure that we are, being incredibly deliberate about what we're choosing to keep our eyes on. Because absolutely, I have ideas all the time about, should we be going after, bigger companies, or, maybe just teams, or are there other ways to solve this problem? And there's so much, it's such a complex, in-depth problem. But for now, I think because, my vision has always been to, how do you help these CEOs build great companies, do well at their jobs, make them feel like they're just rocking as a CEO. For now, that's really been my focus. So yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pick another question from Mark.
Cool.
Stephen, which is about workaholics, and I'm getting them to stop. But just while we kind of present that as an observation, there are 2 kinds of companies in the world, and there are ones that have a long-term focus, and then there are ones that are more short-term. And those short-term thinking companies may be angel-backed or venture-backed businesses that want to scale, and they have a ton of things that they will offer their employees without necessarily offering them kind of long-term support.
Sure.
And you're doing a kind of a dance with the devil there, I guess. You kind of are taking a bet that you're really good and you won't burn out and you'll do really well. And you're taking a bet that your share options will increase in value, and that's ultimately going to be worth the lost weekends and yada, yada, yada.
Sure.
That's a very different type of business to most of the businesses that operate out there.
Yes. That's I love that question, because I don't actually think people ask it enough. So for me personally, the decisions to not take outside funding, the decisions to be 2 people after 2 years and to remain 2 people for now, and to stay super small and to stay really focused, those are all deliberate decisions because of what you're talking about, Mark, is that short-term view and that long-term view. And I mean, again, I'm not saying that folks who do look to get outside funding are evil or short-sighted or anything. I think really it's a personal question of what type of business you want to build. And I can only speak for myself, and I'm biased by my own opinion. So for me personally, and again, just speaking for myself, speaking personally, the questions that I ask myself when I was starting out with Know Your Company and, over time, thought about how we want to grow the business. Because, don't get me wrong, we're all about growth. But the growth that I care about, it's asking the question, who do I want to help? That's the question that I always ask. It's not who do we want to be as a company. It's not, what sort of return do we want as a company, right? The question is, who do we want to help? How can we help those people? And how can we make that outcome as impactful, as valuable, as meaningful for those people as possible? And I don't think people ask that question enough, especially when it comes to business. I think we get really preoccupied with who do we want to be as a company? Do we want to be the next Uber? Do we want to be the next Warby Parker? Do we want to be, whatever? I think we get very preoccupied with asking, what type, who do we want to be as a company? Yeah. And I don't think we ask ourselves enough as business owners of who do we want to help? Who do we want to help? Do you want to help people who are out on the street trying to, flag a cab and it's just really frustrating? Okay, great. Well, then, yeah, you want to be Uber, right? Do we want to help, people who, always buy glasses and it's typically, like $700? Okay, yeah. Well, then we want to help those, right? But we don't ask. Yeah. That's why those companies are successful, is because they ask those questions of who do we want to help, not who do we want to be, how much return do I want, that sort of thing. So that's the question I always ask. So again, for us, who do we want to help? It's CEOs who run companies, small companies, and who can have an impact on the employees and the workplace that they have. So that's who we want to help.
Well, this is a great way to lead into this question then, Mark.
Yeah.
How do you recommend stopping your workaholics to stop and go off and recharge? So there's really 2 questions here. How do you break that news to the CEO, who's probably going to be a workaholic and probably needs to go off and recharge?
Yes.
So how do you break that one-to-one, and then how do you think about breaking that cycle with the rest of the team that's inevitably going to be pulled in?
Great question. It's something that comes up a lot. So one of the events that actually Know Your Company we've helped sponsor and that I've helped speak at, it's something called Owner Summit. And it's a gathering of digital agency owners. And this is a topic that comes up quite a bit. And during one of the conversations that occurred around this, one of the owners self-admitted that his business partner had to pull him aside and make him take a vacation. So, to date, that's probably the best approach that I've heard is, I know a lot of companies that we work with, they have mandatory vacation for their employees. So, you have to take a certain number of days off if you haven't by a certain time in the year. And then in terms of how do you enforce that on leadership? If you're a part of a leadership team and that is something that you're noticing and you're worried about burnout, you're worried about even just the mental health and emotional stability of your leadership team member, pulling them aside and making them take a vacation. I mean, that's the way to do it.
Cool. Is that difficult news for the CEO sometimes when it's the CEO that's the most important?
Yes. I mean, it's, I think, and it's funny, like I can relate in a lot of ways because last year was the first year that I took a real vacation in years and didn't do, a single lick of work, and was out of the country and just, checked my email, but didn't answer any emails and just did zero work, and for me to do that, and the amount of kind of self-control that took and humility that it took, I mean, it's absolutely hard.
Yeah.
And I think, for this owner who I was, talking about and him sharing his experience of his business partner having to tell that to him face, it's a hard thing to wrestle with. And I think the way to do it is, or what made me, and again, this is just personal experience here, is what made me realize ultimately that this was something that I should feel more than fine about, is that it's actually in the best interest of the business too. That it's not me being selfish. It's not someone, being worried about your health or whatever, it's, no, this is actually in the best interest of the business. Your business is going to be better. You're going to come back with fresher ideas. You're going to come back recharged. It's going to be good for the business.
Okay. So a question from John Matthews. I hope that answers that, Mark Stevens, and feel free to come back if you've got any.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I don't know if that fully answered it as well.
To follow up. So this is John Matthews. I imagine this feeds into recruitment. Can Know Your Company help with hiring people that will fit into my company?
Absolutely.
And likewise, what do you think of psychometric tests and other traditional methods of hiring?
Absolutely. And then again, this is just clients who we worked with. We hear from a lot of folks who buy our product who say, the reason I found out about Know Your Company is one of our new employees joined us and said that they use Know Your Company at another company and loved it and asked us if we use it, and we don't. And so we're going to start using it. Right. So that's been, something that we hear really commonly. So it's a recruiting tool in the sense that it's a way to show people how committed you are to making sure that you have a strong culture and open communication channels. The second part of that question, though, I think was a little different. It was asking about, what do I think about traditional recruiting methods? Was that it? Do you mind repeating it, Mark?
It was about traditional recruitment methods, but also then specifically things like psychometric tests to work out whether people will fit into the organization.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a little biased. I don't think there's any personality test, any sort of psychometric test that can fully encapsulate the range of how unique people are. And I also don't think they translate very well into a work environment, because at the end of the day, the work that for example, if we're hiring a designer at Know Your Company, the outcomes and the work that I want that person to produce, there's no test that is going to be able to capture and produce that. The thing that is closest to it is if I ask a person who I'm looking to hire and I ask her to design redesign our homepage and to do a 2-week project, pay her for it, and see what the results are. So what I, again, the one key hire that I've had to make for Know Your Company, at least, and I've hired other people in the past, but for the one other person who is a part of Know Your Company, the one thing that I stressed was we did I believe it was a 1-month paid trial of him as a programmer working on everything Know Your Company related, and that was the key test for me to know if he would be the right fit. And so one thing that I always that I've gotten great advice on and have passed on that advice is in hiring, if you can closely give some sort of situation that is as close to the real work as possible, or even the real work itself, and even pay the person for it. This isn't about getting free work. This is about you covering your ass as a business owner to make sure you have the right fit for this person, and put someone in a situation as close as possible so that they can, so that you can suss out as quickly as possible if they can actually do the work. That's the most important thing. Can they do the work, right? And then in terms of sussing out, though, like, is this going to be a great person to work with? Am I going to be able to communicate with them well? Are they going to gel with their employees? So the way that I look to do that is also, I don't really believe in tests or personality tests of that sort. Really, again, I believe in the real power of just having a face-to-face conversation with someone, and in that interview process. And the two things that I personally look for when I interview people, and again, I got this great advice from a few mentors of mine. It's two things. It's humility and hustle. Those are the two things that I look for, because I believe that it's those two things that you cannot teach. And the and they're the things that they're so key. To be able to work with someone who has the humility to know when they are wrong, someone who has the humility to admit when they've made a mistake, someone who has the humility to put the business concept and vision before their own personal interests. That's who I want to work with. And then the second thing, hustle. Again, something really hard to teach. You can teach people practically anything, whether it's HTML or, a new coding language or, a certain way to write customer support. You can teach someone practically anything, but it is so difficult to teach someone to be persistent, to work hard, and to have hustle. So I always look for that as well. I hope that answers the question as well.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now picking up on something that you mentioned before, you said some companies will have a minimum vacation policy, and I think Balsamic are probably the one that I know best that's kind of closest to this. They have I think it's 25 days minimum holiday per year, or your shot or something. I don't quite know how that I'm not sure.
I want to go work there.
Peldy would gun you to death or something. I don't know.
Sure.
Companies are going or a lot of companies have gone the other way, and they've had an unlimited vacation policy, and taxis home if you're working after 11 o'clock, or dinner in the office. It's becoming easier and easier to spend all your time at work.
Yes.
And there are some quite, strange stories of apartment buildings in San Francisco where the kind of knowledge workers kind of come back, and there are just hordes of Ubers and delivery people and laundry people, and kind of creating this. It's a very weird environment that's being created in that sort of situation. Is it for the best interests of the employees, or is it to get every last scrap of work out of them, in your view?
It is not in the best interest of the employee nor the employer, in my opinion, Mark. It actually kind of sickens me, to be frank, because and honestly, it's really short-sighted as well, because the intention is what you expressed in your latter statement, which is the intention from a business perspective is that you want to create an environment where people will be producing as much as possible in the greatest amount of time as possible. So yes, like you were saying, we're going to cater in lunch, dinner, breakfast, do your laundry, you can sleep here, whatever, right? You can live close to, whatever it is, right? So that is the intention. is to get as much out of people, right? The reality of the situation is and you know, I think the best way to think about this is to reflect on each of ourselves. You know, when you personally reflect, in what environment do I do my best work? You know, in what environment do I do my best work? Is it if I'm going from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., you know, just straight? Is it if I'm, you know, eating lunch at the office, dinner at the office, so if I'm in, you know, the same space? No. I believe people are truly productive for maybe, and again, this is a personal thing, maybe 4 hours a day. Maybe, truly productive, maybe 4 hours a day. Like, that's a good day. You get 4 hours of actually really good productive work done. And in the meantime, it doesn't mean that you have to be in the office. It doesn't mean you have to be doing work things, you know. It's insane, actually, because if you're an employer, like the way, and this is, you know, the way that I think about it as a business owner, as a CEO, is that I do want my employees to produce the best work, but I know that means giving them the best environment to do that. So that means, you know, Matt, our other employee, can work from wherever. It means that if he needs to go run groceries, you know, in the morning on a Tuesday at 10 a.m., he should go do that. If he needs to take a doctor's appointment, you know, he should go do that. There's no requirement to be online. There's no requirement to check in, to check out. You know, it's, you know, when you ask the question of in what environment do I work the best in, right, personally, and then try to translate that to your employees. Yeah, I mean, we're all about wanting to get and create great work and to make sure that we're producing great work, but it's short-sighted. It doesn't pay off in the long term, and it's not how people want to work, in my opinion. So yeah, it's a great observation.
I agree. And funnily enough, I put a thing together here.
Yeah.
Just see if I can find it. It was a blog post around this. It was a Harvard Business Review thing saying that companies with engaged employees are more productive, and of course they are. But actually, I think there's one of the challenges with very rapidly scaling companies, and with some of the companies that are really exploding at the moment, is that they can rely on, you know, if they're not around in 3 years, they don't care too much because they've either sold for something very big, or they've leveraged their own careers up quite significantly. They've probably done very well from stock options. If they haven't, then it's a bit. But everyone's kind of betting that they're the person and that they'll be able to kind of keep pace with the company, and that's a huge challenge, isn't it? I mean, it really. It doesn't matter if those people drop out of the system, because there are tons of other people waiting to ride over the hill to into the battle, and it's the more traditional companies that have this as something, you know, they have it much more as a kind of a core value typically, and they have to.
Right. I mean, I think it's you know, what's so interesting, Mark, is one, I'm really happy you brought this point up, but two, I think the thing that's so interesting is exactly what you described, is that it's becoming like a trend. It's becoming a very, this kind of overarching sentiment of, you know, that this is the direction that business is moving, you know, and the tech industry is moving, right? And the thing that I find really interesting about that, and I think there's actually a huge opportunity, is to be different than that as a company. So to say and to be, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, when you are different, right, as a company, and you do things differently, and you know, you talk about yourself differently and treat your employees differently. If you are different as a company, you stand out, right? So if you as a company, you're looking for competitive advantage, you know, don't be like everyone else. Don't be like the hordes of companies that are trying to, you know, essentially try to keep their employees 24 hours, you know, at work, right? You know, encourage, like I was saying, you know, forced vacations, encourage that people, you know, live their lives, take breaks, see their kids, you know, work from home, work from wherever, right? You know,
don't work from home if you've got kids.
Or don't work from home if you don't. Right. And don't mix some of the recommendations together that I'm suggesting here. No, totally. You know, the point being is that the cool thing is, I think there's with every kind of wave of sameness that happens, right? There's always an opportunity to be the person or the company that is going against the grain, and those are the people who stand out, and those are the people who eventually, when all this noise settles down about, oh, you know, we need catered lunch, breakfast, dinner, laundry, everything delivered to the office. When all that, the din of that settles down, the companies that are really going to last, companies that are going to really attract the best people and the right people, the people who are going to really stick with them and do the best work are the people who from the get-go were like, no, that's not cool. I wouldn't want that if I'm an employee, and I'm not going to run my company like that. So yeah, I don't know. I would encourage people who, if you do feel that way about, the state of things, to be different. It's the perfect time to.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, this is a conversation that we had with Steli yesterday. I mean, his hangout could have been subtitled "It Depends." And,
which is life.
I think exactly. I mean, I think in startups and companies, there is a rule that works for most people, and it's kind of best practice. And then you have someone that goes completely the other way. Go, wow.
Yep.
And they do. The problem then becomes when everyone else turns around and goes, "Hey, well, we want to be like that one." And everyone starts to go off. And I think culture has to be authentic. It has to be something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I was sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off at all. I couldn't be more in line with that. I think it's so interesting to look at our society just as a society, because we are structured in a way where when we see people or things that are successful, we try to emulate them. It's human nature, right? So for example, if someone, is a doctor, or is a successful banker, or is a successful lawyer, you ask them, where did you go to school? Where did you live? What did your parents teach you? What did you study in school? And then, you try to do all those things, right? And it's how our world is structured. Is if there's a model or an example or something that we see as success, we try to follow that path. And the funniest thing, or the most ironic thing in my opinion, is that most people who are truly happy, have found, real fulfillment and success in life, are people who have not listened to any of what those examples are and just listened to themselves. And like you were saying, been authentic. Yeah. And this applies for, your personal path in life. This applies as a business owner and running your company, is that instead of looking around and asking and seeing, who are all these people? What are they doing that are, that's successful? Who are they getting funded by? Where are they starting their businesses? Who are they hiring from? What are they doing? What job boards are, instead of that, just ask, who are you? What do you want? What do you care about? How do you want to run your business? If you were an employee, how would you like to be treated? It's all about, when you refocus on just, being yourself, trusting yourself. That's when you become a true original, right? That's when you carve really your own path, and that's where you really get that true success and happiness and fulfillment in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I think a lot of people actually become entrepreneurs because they don't like working for the bosses they work with, and they see them and the flaws that they have and think they can do better. And it's sometimes worth just taking a step back and thinking about that, and thinking about those sucky jobs you did have. And
it is. Absolutely. And I think. And I think as entrepreneurs and as business owners, the deeper kind of we get into it, the more exposed we are to people telling us that we should start doing things like other people, and start, oh, well, you should do that. You start to get more and more advice, right? And so, and this is also kind of ironic, but the best advice that I've personally gotten in running my business and the decisions that we make is to trust myself. And it's Claire, you are the only person who has to live with these consequences, and you are the only person who cares about this problem in this business as much as you do. So trust yourself. And so that's something that I always keep in mind, because it can be hard to lose sight of that the longer you run your business for.
I think that's a really good point to stop. I mean, we're just about on time. So
perfect.
No, I think trust yourself is a really nice thing to leave on. So thank you very much. What a great romp through all sorts of stuff there. And when I watch the videos and things and read the transcripts before we do these talks, so
love it.
Sort of remind myself of what I've been missing. But it's all coming up again, because we've got Europe in May, 16th and 17th in Dublin. And that is going to be fantastic, particularly if you've never been to Ireland before. And it's the 10th Business of Software USA in September. And we're going to be announcing some more speakers very, very shortly. And the price is going to go up. So you want to wait for the speakers? You want to wait for the price to go up?
Just go. You should just go. Everyone should just go. Everyone should just go. No brainer. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, brilliant. That's very nice to hear. And yeah, I think we'd love to. I mean, I think the other thing we'd really love to do is get some of our speakers. I mean, a lot of them come back year on year anyway, but actually kind of get them back and involved and maybe do some office hours and things like that.
Ooh, I like that.
You know, we can kind of schedule some time with people with problems.
Love it. Love it.
I have plenty of people with problems that I can pass out to everyone. So.
I love it. Yeah,
Claire,
no, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Claire Lou, about your company. Thanks a lot.
Bye now.